They thought they had humiliated me, but I had something much bigger in store for them. At the main city festival, in front of hundreds of people, I walked onto the stage with a microphone. My wife and her lover were standing in the crowd, smiling smugly. They didn't know that in my hands, I held the proof of their lies, their financial schemes, and their escape plan. 5 minutes later, the entire town knew who they really were. The sound of Sienna's laughter cut through the smoky air of Murphy's bar like a rusty knife. I'd heard that laugh 1,000 times before, but tonight it felt different, meaner, more deliberate. "Stop acting like we're married, Colin," she shouted across the crowded bar, her voice carrying over the jukebox and pool table conversations. "You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." The entire Friday night crowd turned to stare. Harper, Sienna's best friend since college, giggled behind her martini glass. Even Leah from HR was smirking, her phone already out to capture the moment for social media. 23 people witnessed my public humiliation that night. I counted every single face. My name is Colin Barrett, and I'm what you might call an old-school guy in a New World marriage. 38 years old, former boxer turned contractor, married to a tech marketing executive who makes twice my salary and never lets me forget it. That Friday night at Murphy's, something inside me finally snapped clean in half. I forced a smile and raised my beer bottle. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. My mistake." Inside, though, a cold voice whispered, "Guess she forgot who pays the mortgage on that Victorian house she loves so much." Sienna stumbled off her bar stool, designer heels clicking against the sticky floor. "I'm going away this weekend. Girls' trip to Portland. Don't wait up." Harper wrapped her arm around Sienna's waist, both of them swaying slightly. "We're going to have so much fun, right, Sienna?" "The best," Sienna slurred, not even looking at me. Finally, some time away from all this small-town nonsense. Lydia, the bartender who'd been serving drinks in this dive for 15 years, caught my eye and shook her head sympathetically. She'd seen plenty of marriages implode right here at Murphy's. Mine was just the latest casualty. As my wife and her entourage stumbled toward the exit, I heard Harper's voice carry back. "I can't believe you actually married him. What were you thinking?" "Temporary insanity," Sienna replied, loud enough for half the bar to hear. "But don't worry, I'm fixing that mistake real soon." The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone with my beer and the stares of everyone who'd witnessed my humiliation. Old Mrs. Folsom, my elderly neighbor who somehow always ended up at Murphy's on Friday nights, slid onto the stool next to me. "That girl's been running around on you for months, dear," she said quietly, her weathered hands wrapped around a whiskey neat. "Everyone knows it except you." "Is that so?" I kept my voice level, but inside that cold voice was getting louder. Derek Shaw, that tech boy with the fancy Tesla, seen them together at his downtown loft more times than I can count. Mrs. Folsom's eyes glittered with malicious gossip. She parks 2 blocks away, thinks nobody notices. Derek Shaw. I knew the name. Wealthy, smug entrepreneur who'd made millions selling some app to Google. The kind of guy who wore 1,000 suits and treated waitresses like servants. Everything I wasn't. "Thanks for the information," I said, finishing my beer. "What are you going to do about it?" I stood up, threw a 20 on the bar, and looked down at Mrs. Folsom's expectant face. Nothing she doesn't deserve. The drive home took 12 minutes. 12 minutes to plan the first phase of what would become the most satisfying revenge of my life. Sienna wanted to pretend we weren't married. Perfect. I'd give her exactly what she asked for. Our house sat on Maple Street, a converted Victorian that I'd spent 3 years renovating with my own hands. Every board, every nail, every coat of paint. Sienna had picked out colors and furniture, but I had built our home from the foundation up. My name was on the deed, My money had paid for the renovations. My sweat had made it beautiful. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking up at the dark windows. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I had work to do. The first call went to my lawyer, Jim Morrison. No relation to the singer, but he got that joke about 50 times a day. Jim had handled my business contracts for years, and more importantly, he was available 24 hours a day for emergencies. Call in. It's past midnight. What's wrong? I need to protect my assets, Jim. Tonight. How fast can you freeze joint accounts? Jesus, what happened? My wife just announced she's not really my wife. I'm taking her at her word. Jim was quiet for a moment. How much evidence do you have of infidelity? Working on it, but I need the accounts locked down before she tries to clean them out. I can file emergency paperwork first thing Monday morning. But, Colin, are you sure about this? Once we start down this road, she started down this road months ago. I'm just catching up. After hanging up with Jim, I made 3 more calls. The locksmith who'd installed our security system owed me a favor from when I'd renovated his kitchen for free. He agreed to come by Sunday morning, no questions asked. The bank manager was a guy I'd gone to high school with. He'd expedite the paperwork to remove Sienna's access to our joint accounts. The third call went to my foreman, Nate, who had connections throughout the city and a mouth bigger than the harbor. You need dirt on Derek Shaw? Nate's growly voice crackled through the phone. That pompous bastard. Give me 24 hours. What kind of dirt? The kind that ruins reputations. Trust me, boss. Rich boys like Shaw always have skeletons. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I had a plan. By Sunday night, I'd have a new life. And by the end of the month, Sienna and Derek would understand what happened when you publicly humiliated Colin Barrett. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat on the front porch, watching the empty street. Mrs. Folsom's house was dark, but I knew she was probably peeking through her curtains, waiting to see what would happen next. The old woman lived for drama, and I was about to give her the show of a lifetime. You want to know where you can go, Sienna? I said quietly to the night air. Anywhere but here. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical for coastal Maine in October. I woke up on the couch with a bourbon hangover and a crystal-clear sense of purpose. Sienna's girls' weekend was the perfect opportunity to set my trap. First stop, Mick's boxing gym on Harbor Street. Miko Sullivan had trained me, back when I thought I might go professional, before I discovered I was better at building things than breaking faces. Now he ran the grittiest gym in the city, a place where ex-cons and college boys learned to respect each other through shared pain. You look like hell, Mick said as I walked through the door. At 65, he was still built like a fire hydrant, all muscle and scars and attitude. Marriage troubles? You could say that. I wrapped my hands and started working the heavy bag, letting each punch carry some of my anger. Sienna decided to announce to the entire bar last night that we're not really married. Ouch. Mick held the bag steady as I unleashed a combination that would have dropped most men. What are you going to do about it? Hit back, but smart. Smart how? I stopped punching and looked at him. You remember what you used to tell me about fighting bigger opponents? Use their weight against them. Let them overextend, then counter. Exactly. Sienna thinks she's smarter than me. Derek thinks his money makes him untouchable. They're both about to learn they're wrong. Mick grinned, showing teeth that had been rearranged by 30 years of boxing. You need help? Just keep your ears open. This is going to get interesting. After the gym, I drove downtown to Murphy's Bar. Saturday afternoons were slow, just a few regulars nursing hangovers and watching college football. Lydia was working the day shift, polishing glasses and pretending not to listen to conversations. Rough night last night, she said as I sat down. Getting better by the hour. What do you know about Derek Shaw? Lydia's eyes lit up. Bartenders were like priests. Everyone confessed their sins to them, and they remembered everything. Rich boy with wandering hands and a big mouth. Tips weld that treats the staff like servants. Why? He's been seeing my wife. I'm curious about his habits. Ah, Lydia leaned closer, lowering her voice. He comes in here Tuesday nights, usually with different women, brags about his business deals, name-drop celebrities he's never met. Classic insecure rich guy behavior. What kind of business deals? Real estate mostly. Buying up old buildings downtown, converting them to luxury condos. But here's the interesting part. He's been bragging about some big acquisition that's going to make him even richer. Something about waterfront property. I filed that information away. Anyone else he brings around? Your wife, obviously, but also this blonde woman from the city planning office. They seemed pretty cozy last month. Corruption. Even better than adultery for destroying someone's reputation. Thanks, Lydia. Keep this conversation between us. What conversation? She winked and moved down the bar to serve another customer. Sunday morning, Tommy the locksmith arrived at 8 sharp. He was a small, nervous man who'd been grateful for the kitchen renovation I'd done for free after his wife left him. You sure about this, Colin? Changing locks while the wife's away? That's serious business. She made it clear we're not married, Tommy. I'm just taking her at her word. It took 2 hours to change every lock in the house. Front door, back door, basement, garage, even the shed. New deadbolts, new keys, new security codes. While Tommy worked, I packed Sienna's belongings into boxes, not vindictively, just efficiently. Clothes, shoes, makeup, jewelry, personal items, everything that belonged to her. Mrs. Folsom appeared at her kitchen window around noon, watching the proceedings with undisguised fascination. I waved at her, and she actually waved back. The old gossip was going to have a field day with this story. At 2 o'clock, Nate arrived with a manila folder thick with papers. Derek Shaw's life story, he announced, settling his massive frame into my kitchen chair. Nate was 6'4" and built like a linebacker with hands the size of dinner plates and a surprisingly sharp mind for strategy. This boy's been busy. What did you find? 3 separate building code violations he's covered up with bribes, 2 sexual harassment complaints that mysteriously disappeared. And here's the best part. He's been using shell companies to buy property with dirty money. Dirty how? Money laundering for out-of-state investors. Nothing the FBI could prove, but enough to destroy his reputation if it got out. I flipped through the documents. Bank records, property transfers, photographs of Derek with known criminals. How did you get all this? I got friends in low places, boss. And Derek Shaw made a lot of enemies. Turns out rich boys who screw over contractors and cheat on their taxes don't inspire loyalty. Perfect. What about the harassment complaints? One was a waitress at Murphy's, Lydia's cousin actually. The other was a city planning clerk. Both got paid off to keep quiet. The pieces were falling into place. Derek wasn't just an adulterer. He was a criminal. And criminals were vulnerable in ways that rich boys weren't. There's more. Nate continued. Shaw's been telling people he's going to marry some tech executive and move to California. Apparently, he's already put a down payment on the house in Silicon Valley. My blood went cold. When? End of November, soon as his current business deals close. So, this wasn't just an affair. This was an exit strategy. Sienna and Derek had been planning to run away together, probably with as much of my money as they could steal. The public humiliation at Murphy's was just the opening move in a larger game. Thanks, Nate. Send copies of everything to my lawyer. What's the plan, boss? I looked out the kitchen window at Mrs. Folsom's house, where the old woman was still watching from behind her curtains. We're going to give this town something to talk about. Sunday evening, I sat on my front porch with a beer, waiting. Sienna's car pulled into the driveway at exactly 7:30, right on schedule. She looked tanned and relaxed, probably from spending the weekend in Derek's bed instead of Portland with the girls. She tried her key in the front door. It didn't work. She tried again, jiggling the handle. Nothing. "Colin!" she shouted, pounding on the door. "Colin, what the hell is wrong with this lock?" I didn't answer, just sat there drinking my beer, watching her panic. "I know you're in there! Open this door right now!" Mrs. Folsom's front door opened, and the old woman stepped onto her porch in her bathrobe and slippers. "He changed the locks, dear," she called out cheerfully. "Around noon today. Had a locksmith and everything." Sienna spun around, her face flushed with anger. "What are you talking about?" "Well, you said you weren't married to him, so I guess he figured you didn't need keys to his house anymore." "This is my house, too." "Is it?" Mrs. Folsom's voice carried the sweet venom of an elderly woman who had been waiting years for this moment. "Because I heard you tell the whole bar Friday night that you weren't really married. Maybe you should call your boyfriend. I'm sure he's got room for you." Sienna's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked at her car, then at the house, then at Mrs. Folsom's grinning face. Finally, she looked up at me sitting on the porch. "You can't do this," she said. I stood up, walked to the porch railing, and looked down at her. "You're right. I can't tell you where to go or who to be with, but I also don't have to give you a place to come back to." "This is insane. I was just drunk on Friday. You know I didn't mean it." Funny thing about truth, Sienna. It has a way of coming out when people's guards are down. She tried a different approach, softening her voice. "Colin, please, let's talk about this inside. We can work this out. We can talk." "But not inside. That's my house now. You made it very clear that we're not married." "So you don't live here anymore? Where am I supposed to go?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Anywhere but here. Isn't that what you wanted?" Sienna stood in the driveway for another 10 minutes, alternating between threats and pleas. I didn't move from the porch. Finally, she got back in her car and drove away, tires squealing against the wet pavement. Mrs. Folsom was still on her porch, practically vibrating with excitement. "That was better than cable TV," she called out. "What happens next?" "Now the real fun begins," I replied. "First round was mine, but this was just the opening bell." Monday morning brought the kind of crisp October weather that made living in Maine worthwhile. I was at the construction site by 6:30, pouring coffee from my thermos and watching the sunrise paint the harbor orange and gold. My crew wouldn't arrive for another hour, giving me time to think and plan. My phone had been buzzing all night with texts from Sienna, ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. I'd read them all, but hadn't responded. Let her wonder what I was thinking. Uncertainty was a weapon, and I intended to use it. At Harp, Jim Morrison called with good news. "Emergency injunction granted," he said. "All joint accounts are frozen pending divorce proceedings. She can't touch a penny without court approval." How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. Depends on how nasty this gets. But Colin, I have to warn you. She's already hired Rebecca Walsh. I whistled low. Rebecca Walsh was the most expensive divorce attorney in the state, known for destroying husbands and taking half of everything they owned. How can she afford Walsh if the accounts are frozen? Good question. Either she's got money stashed somewhere, or someone's paying her legal fees. Derek had to be, which meant they were more serious about this than I'd thought. What's my exposure? The house is in your name only, and you can prove you paid for all the renovations. Most of your business assets are protected. But Jim, if she can prove you locked her out maliciously, a judge might not look favorably on that. She announced to a bar full of witnesses that we weren't married. I've got 23 people who heard her say it. That's good. Document everything. And Colin, be careful. Walsh doesn't just win cases. She destroys people. After hanging up, I called Nate and told him to spread the word. Anyone who'd been at Murphy's Friday night needed to write down exactly what they'd heard Sienna say, word for word, with dates and times. This was going to be a war of documentation. The morning flew by in a blur of concrete pours and electrical inspections. Around noon, Leia from Sienna's company showed up at the job site. She was a mousy woman in her 30s who worked in HR and had always seemed intimidated by Sienna's aggressive personality. "Colin, can I talk to you privately?" We walked away from the crew over to a stack of lumber where we couldn't be overheard. "I probably shouldn't be here," Leia said, glancing around nervously. "But I thought you should know. Sienna's telling everyone at work that you're abusive, that you locked her out and threatened her." "Is that what she's saying?" "She came in this morning with some story about how you've been controlling and violent, and she finally stood up to you. She's got people feeling sorry for her." I nodded, not surprised. "What do you think, Leia? In the 3 years you've known us, have I ever seemed abusive?" "God, no. If anything, you've been too patient with her, the way she talks about you at office parties." Leia trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "What does she say? That you're beneath her? That she married down and regrets it? That she's planning to upgrade to someone more suitable?" "Upgrade? Like I was a used car she wanted to trade in?" "Has she mentioned Derek Shaw?" Leia's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Yes, she's been bragging about him for months. Says he's everything you're not. Rich, sophisticated, connected. She even showed us pictures of his loft. Pictures on her phone. The two of them together. She wasn't exactly subtle about it. This was better than I'd hoped." "Leia, would you be willing to testify about what you've heard in court if necessary?" I could lose my job." "You could also help prevent an innocent man from being destroyed by false accusations." She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with her conscience. "She's been horrible to work with lately. Arrogant, demanding, treating everyone like servants. And the things she said about you." Leia looked up at me with something like pity. "Yes, I'll testify. Someone needs to tell the truth." That afternoon, I drove downtown to Derek's building. The Shaw development offices occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. I didn't go inside, just sat in my truck across the street, watching. At 4:30, Derek emerged from the building with Sienna beside him. Even from a distance, I could see his smug expression, the way he put his hand on her back possessively. They got into his Tesla and drove toward the waterfront district. I followed at a distance, curious to see where they'd go. They parked outside Chat Laurent, the most expensive restaurant in the city. Through the window, I watched them settle into a corner booth, heads close together, obviously planning something. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop following us, or I'll call the police." Derek. Interesting. He'd noticed my truck. That suggested either paranoia or guilt. Probably both. I texted back, "Public streets, public restaurants, but thanks for confirming you're together." No response. Tuesday evening, I was back at Murphy's bar, nursing a beer and listening to Lydia's gossip. "The place was busier than usual. Word had gotten out about Sienna's public humiliation, and people were coming by hoping for more drama." "Your wife's been calling here," Lydia said, wiping down the bar, asking if you come in regularly, what you drink, who you talk to. "Sounds like she's building a case. What did you tell her? That you're a gentleman who minds his own business and tips well?" "Unlike some people I could mention." Derek Shaw. Bingo. He was in here again last night drunk and bragging about some big score he's planning. Said he's going to own half the waterfront by Christmas. Did he say how? Something about inside information from the city planning office. And get this, he kept talking about his beautiful new partner and how they're going to California together. I felt that cold anger building again. He said, "Partner. Business partner. Life partner. He wasn't clear, but he was definitely talking about a woman, and from the way he described her, it sounded like your wife. So they weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together, probably using information Sienna had access to through her tech company's city contracts, combined with Derek's development connections. A classic inside trading scheme. Lydia, do you remember exactly what he said about the city planning office? Something about having a friend there who tells him which properties are coming up for development before the information goes public. He buys them cheap, then sells them for huge profits when the development plans are announced. That's illegal. Sure is, but proving it's another matter. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks for the information. Anytime, honey. And Colin, be careful. Derek Shaw's got connections, and your wife's got a mean streak. That's a dangerous combination. Wednesday morning, Nate arrived at the job site with more intelligence. I found Shaw's weak spot, he announced, grinning like a shark. The man's got an ego the size of Texas and the common sense of a goldfish. What do you mean? He can't keep his mouth shut. Been bragging all over town about his business deals, his women, his plans. Half the city knows he's sleeping with your wife. That's not necessarily a weakness. It is when he's also bragging about bribing city officials and laundering money. I got 3 different people who heard him admit to crimes. All we need is someone willing to wear a wire. I thought about that. Too risky. If he finds out, he'll disappear and Sienna with him. So, what's the plan? I looked out at the harbor where fishing boats were heading out for the day's catch. We're going to let Derek Shaw destroy himself, and we're going to make sure everyone's watching when he does it. How? By giving him exactly what he wants. A chance to show off in front of the whole city. The Waterfront Festival was coming up in 2 weeks, the biggest social event of the year, where all of the city's elite gathered to see and be seen. Derek would never miss an opportunity to network and show off his wealth. And if I played this right, it would be the perfect stage for his downfall. Nate, I need you to spread some rumors, quietly, carefully. Let it slip that I'm planning to make some kind of public announcement at the festival. Something about Sienna and Derek. What kind of announcement? Doesn't matter. Let people's imaginations fill in the details. The important thing is that Derek hears about it and decides he needs to be there to control the narrative. You want him at the festival. I want him center stage, because that's where I'm going to destroy him. Thursday afternoon, my plan got an unexpected boost. Mrs. Folsom knocked on my door, practically vibrating with excitement. You need to see this, she said, holding up her phone. I was taking pictures of my garden this morning, and look what I caught. The photo showed Derek's Tesla parked in my driveway at 7 in the morning, with Derek and Sienna clearly visible through the windshield. They were obviously casing the house, probably planning some kind of break-in or evidence planting. Mrs. Folsom, you're a treasure. Can you send me that photo? Already did. And I called the police to report suspicious activity. Officer Martinez said he'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. Perfect. Now Derek and Sienna knew they were being launched, which would make them more desperate and more likely to make mistakes. That evening, I got a call from Jim Morrison. We have a problem, he said. Rebecca Walsh is claiming you've been stalking her client and making threats. She's asking for a restraining order. Based on what evidence? Photos of your truck outside Derek Shaw's building? Text messages. The fact that you changed the locks. The truck was on a public street. The text was a response to his message, and changing the locks was protecting my property. I know that, and you know that. But Walsh is good at spinning narratives. We need to be more careful. How careful? No more surveillance. No more contact with Sienna or Derek. Let them make the next move. I agreed, but privately I knew the surveillance phase was over anyway. I had all the information I needed. Now it was time to set the trap and wait for them to walk into it. Friday night, exactly 1 week after Sienna's public humiliation, I was back at Murphy's bar. The same crowd, the same atmosphere, but everything had changed. People looked at me differently now, with respect instead of pity, curiosity instead of dismissal. Lydia poured my usual beer without being asked. "How are you holding up?" "Better every day." "Any word from our mutual friends?" Derek was in Tuesday night, but he seemed nervous, kept looking over his shoulder, checking his phone, and he wasn't bragging as much as usual. "Interesting. What about Sienna?" "Haven't seen her, but Harper was in yesterday asking questions about you. Wanted to know if you'd been talking to anyone, making plans." Harper. Sienna's loyal sidekick, always ready to stir up drama. "What did you tell her?" "Same thing I tell everyone. You're a stand-up guy who deserves better." I raise my beer in a toast. Here's to getting what we deserve. Amen to that. As I sat there, surrounded by the low hum of conversation and the clink of glasses, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. The trap was set. The players were in position, and in 1 week at the Waterfront Festival, everyone would see what happened when you underestimated Colin Barrett. The joke was about to be on them. The morning of the Waterfront Festival dawned clear and bright, with a kind of crisp October air that made the harbor sparkle like diamonds. I stood on my front porch with my coffee, watching the early setup crews string lights and arrange vendor booths along the waterfront. Tonight, half the city would gather for food, music, and the kind of social networking that kept small towns running. Tonight, Derek Shaw and Sienna would learn what public humiliation really felt like. My phone buzzed with a text from Nate. "Everything's ready, boss." "You sure about this?" I typed back. Never been more sure of anything. The plan was simple, which made it beautiful. Derek's ego wouldn't let him miss the festival, especially if he thought I might cause a scene. He'd want to be there to control the narrative, to play the victim if necessary. Sienna would be with him, playing the role of the wronged woman who'd finally found true love. They had no idea what was waiting for them. At noon, I drove to Mick's gym for one last workout. Physical activity helped me think, and I needed my mind sharp for tonight. Mick was waiting with the heavy bag and a knowing smile. "Big night tonight," he said, holding the bag steady as I warmed up with light jabs. "Could be. You nervous?" I threw a hard right cross that made the bag jump. Excited. Good. Nervous fighters make mistakes. Excited fighters win fights. We worked for an hour drilling combinations and footwork. Boxing had taught me patience, strategy, and the importance of waiting for the right moment to strike. Tonight was my moment. At 4 o'clock, I went home to shower and change. I chose my clothes carefully. Dark jeans, white button-down shirt, navy blazer. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a working man who belonged in this community. Mrs. Folsom was on her porch when I left the house, dressed in her Sunday best and carrying a small purse. "You clean up nice, dear," she said. "Going to the festival?" "Wouldn't miss it. I'll be there. Front row seat for whatever's going to happen." Her eyes twinkled with anticipation. "This is better than my soap operas." The festival was in full swing when I arrived at 6:30. The waterfront park was packed with families, couples, and groups of friends enjoying the food trucks, craft vendors, and live music. The main stage sat at the center of it all, where local bands would perform throughout the evening. I spotted Derek and Sienna almost immediately. They were holding court near the wine tent, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers and hangers-on. Derek wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Sienna had on a red dress that hugged her curves and drew appreciative glances from every man in sight. They looked perfect together. Wealthy, attractive, successful. The kind of power couple that small cities loved to celebrate. Harper was there too, along with Leia from Sienna's office and several other people I recognized from Murphy's bar. The whole cast was assembled for the final act. I bought a beer from the nearest vendor and found a spot near the stage where I could watch without being obvious about it. Nate appeared beside me, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt and tie. "They're here," he said quietly. "I see them. Everything ready?" "Lydia's got the sound system handled. Mrs. Folsom's got her phone ready to record, and I've got 3 guys positioned around the crowd to make sure nobody interferes." "Perfect. What about the evidence? Copies distributed to the right people. Your lawyer's got everything, and there are backup copies in safe places." I nodded, feeling that familiar pre-fight calm settling over me. "Then let's give this town a show they'll never forget." At 7:30, the current band finished their set, and the festival organizer took the microphone to introduce the next act. That was my cue. I walked toward the stage, moving through the crowd with purpose. People noticed me coming. Conversation stopped, heads turned, and I could feel the electricity of anticipation building. "Excuse me," I said to the organizer, a nervous little man named Pete who ran the Chamber of Commerce. "I'd like to make a brief announcement before the next band." "Oh, I don't know, Colin. We've got a tight schedule. It'll just take a minute. Community announcement, very important." Pete looked uncertain, but he handed me the microphone. The crowd had gone quiet, sensing drama. I could see Derek and Sienna pushing through the people trying to get closer to the stage. I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. Hundreds of people, all waiting to see what Colin Barrett had to say. "Good evening, everyone." I began my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I want to thank you all for coming out tonight to support our community. This festival represents everything that makes our city great. Neighbors coming together, local businesses thriving, and the kind of connections that keep small towns strong." There were murmurs of agreement from the crowd. So far, so good. I also want to take this opportunity to clear up some confusion that's been going around lately. You see, there have been some rumors about my marriage, and I think it's important to set the record straight. I could see Derek and Sienna near the front of the crowd. Now Derek's face was red with anger, and he was pushing forward like he wanted to rush the stage. Sienna looked pale and frightened. Last Friday night at Murphy's bar, my wife Sienna made an announcement to everyone present. She said, and I quote, "Stop acting like we're married, Colin. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. People were pulling out their phones, recording everything. Now, I was confused by this statement because I thought we were married. We had a ceremony, signed papers, the whole thing. But Sienna seemed very certain that we weren't really married. So I decided to take her at her word. Derek was shouting something, but the crowd noise drowned him out. Security, actually. Nate and 2 of his friends moved to block his path to the stage. It turns out Sienna was right about one thing. She should be free to go where she wants and be with who she wants. And she's been exercising that freedom for months now with Derek Shaw, a local businessman who specializes in luxury real estate development. Now the crowd was buzzing with excitement. This was better than reality TV. Derek and Sienna have been planning quite a future together. They're moving to California, where Derek has already put money down on a house. But here's the interesting part. They've been financing their romance with some creative business practices. I pulled out a folder of documents, copies of everything Nate had gathered. Derek Shaw has been using inside information from city planning officials to buy properties before development plans are announced publicly. That's called insider trading, and it's illegal. He's also been accepting money from out-of-state investors with questionable backgrounds, which is called money laundering. Derek was screaming now, his face purple with rage. "That's slander. I'll sue you for everything you have." I smiled and held up my phone. "Actually, Derek, it's all documented. Bank records, property transfers, witness statements, including recordings of you bragging about your crimes at Murphy's bar." The crowd had gone completely silent now, hanging on every word. But the best part is how Derek and Sienna have been working together. Sienna's tech company has contracts with the city, giving her access to planning documents and development schedules. She's been feeding that information to Derek, who uses it to make profitable investments. It's a classic corruption scheme. Sienna finally found her voice.
This is insane. Colin, you're making this up because you're jealous.
Am I? I held up Mrs. Folsom's phone, showing the photo of Derek's Tesla in my driveway, then explained why Derek was casing my house Thursday morning. Were you planning to plant evidence, steal documents, or just intimidate me into staying quiet? The crowd turned to look at Derek and Sienna, who were trapped in the middle of hundreds of hostile faces. Harper tried to push forward to help her friend, but she was blocked by the press of bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, I want you to know that all of this information has been turned over to the appropriate authorities. The FBI is investigating Derek Shaw's business practices, and the city attorney is reviewing Sienna's access to confidential documents. That was a lie. I hadn't contacted the FBI yet, but I would first thing Monday morning. I also want you to know that despite everything that's happened, I bear no ill will toward my wife or her boyfriend. They're free to go wherever they want and be with whoever they want. They just can't do it with stolen money or in my house. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. People were shouting support, laughing at Derek and Sienna, pulling out phones to capture their humiliation. I handed the microphone back to Pete and walked off the stage, moving through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. People patted my back, shook my hand, offered words of encouragement. Behind me, I could hear Derek and Sienna trying to defend themselves, but their voices were drowned out by the noise of the crowd. They were finished in this town. Everyone would know their story by morning, and small communities had long memories for this kind of betrayal. As I reached the edge of the crowd, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Lydia, grinning from ear to ear.
That was beautiful, she said. Absolutely beautiful. Just telling the truth. The best revenge always is.
I walked back to my truck, feeling lighter than I had in months. The October air was crisp and clean, and the sound of the festival continued behind me. Music, laughter, and the buzz of hundreds of conversations about what they'd just witnessed. My phone was already ringing with calls from reporters, lawyers, and curious friends. But I didn't answer. Tonight was for celebration, not explanation. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown. The city looked different somehow, more familiar, more welcoming, like a place where I belonged. Mrs. Folsom was waiting on her porch when I pulled into my driveway. "How did it go?" she called out. "Better than I hoped." "Good. That girl had it coming. And that Derek Shaw, I never liked him. Too smooth, too slick." I walked over to her porch, still wearing my festival clothes, but feeling like a different man than the one who put them on. "Mrs. Folsom, I owe you a debt of gratitude. That photo you took was the key to everything." "Nonsense. You did all the work. I just kept my eyes open." She paused, studying my face. "What happens now?" "Now I get my life back. The real one, not the fake one I've been living." "And them?" I looked back toward the waterfront where the festival was still going strong. "They'll figure something out. They're very resourceful people." "You're not worried about revenge?" "People like that don't usually go quietly." "Let them try. I've got nothing left to hide, and they've got nothing left to threaten me with." Mrs. Folsom nodded approvingly. "You've grown up, Colin Barrett. Your father would be proud." I hadn't thought about my father in months. He'd been a contractor too, a man who believed in hard work, honest dealing, and standing up for yourself when pushed too far. He would have approved of tonight's work. "Thank you, Mrs. Folsom, for everything." "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." She was right, of course. Derek and Sienna wouldn't disappear quietly. There would be lawyers, investigations, probably attempts at retaliation. but for the first time in months, I felt ready for whatever came next. I went inside my house, not our house, and poured myself a bourbon. The silence was perfect. No arguments, no tension, no walking on eggshells around someone who despised me. Just peace. I sat on the front porch with my drink, watching the lights of the festival in the distance and listening to the sound of my city celebrating. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was mine. The joke was finally over. Monday morning arrived with a cold rain that drummed against my bedroom windows and turned the harbor gray as gunmetal. I woke up feeling like I'd won a boxing match, tired but victorious, with the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from a job well done. My phone had 37 missed calls and 82 text messages. Word of Saturday night's festival revelation had spread through the city like wildfire, and everyone wanted to know more details, offer support, or just get their piece of the gossip. The first call I returned was to Jim Morrison. "Colin, what the hell did you do Saturday night?" His voice was tight with stress. "Rebecca Walsh has been calling me since 6 a.m., threatening everything from defamation suits to criminal charges." I told the truth at a public event. Last I checked, that was still legal. The truth according to you. Do you have proof of these corruption allegations? Every word. Bank records, property transfers, witness statements, photographs. Nate compiled it all, and it's bulletproof. Jim was quiet for a moment. Jesus Christ, Colin, you didn't just burn bridges, you napalmed them. There's no going back from this. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. Okay. Forward means we need to be prepared for war. Walsh is going to throw everything she has at you, and Derek Shaw's got enough money to make your life very difficult. Let them come. I've got nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. After hanging up with Jim, I drove to the construction site through streets that felt different than they had a week ago. People waved at me from sidewalks, honked their horns in support, gave me thumbs up from passing cars. The story of Saturday night had turned me into something I'd never been before. A local hero. Nate was waiting at the job site with coffee and a stack of newspapers. "You made the front page," he announced, grinning like a proud father. 3 different papers, plus the online news sites. The headlines were everything I could have hoped for. Local man exposes wife's affair and business corruption at festival. Tech executive and developer caught an insider trading scheme. Waterfront festival becomes stage for dramatic revenge. The articles were surprisingly fair, focusing on the documented evidence rather than the personal drama. Apparently, several reporters had been investigating Derek Shaw's business practices for months, and my public revelations had given them the hook they needed to publish their findings. "There's more," Nate said, pulling out his phone. Derek Shaw's business partners dropped him this morning. 3 separate development deals fell through, and his main investor pulled out completely. What about Sienna? Put on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Her company's reviewing all her city contracts, looking for conflicts of interest. I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. They'd made their choices, and choices had consequences. Any word on retaliation? Nothing direct, but Derek's been making calls, trying to find dirt on you. So far, he's coming up empty. That was the beauty of living a simple, honest life. There wasn't much dirt to find. No secret affairs, no shady business deals, no skeletons in closets. Just a working man who'd finally decided to fight back. The morning flew by in a blur of concrete pours and progress inspections. Around noon, I got an unexpected visitor. Officer Martinez from the city police. "Colin, we need to talk," he said, his expression serious but not hostile. "What about?" "Derek Shaw filed a complaint this morning. Says you've been stalking him, making threats, harassing his business associates." I pulled out my phone and showed him the text exchange from the previous week. He contacted me first. I was on public property doing nothing illegal. Martinez read the messages and nodded. That's what I figured, but I had to follow up on the complaint. Between you and me, Shaw's got a reputation for throwing his weight around when things don't go his way. Any advice? Keep doing what you're doing. Document everything. Stay within the law and let the system work. The FBI is already asking questions about Shaw's business practices, thanks to your festival speech. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Apparently, your allegations lined up with some things they were already investigating. Shaw's in for a rough couple of months. After Martinez left, I felt a deep sense of vindication. The system was working exactly as it should. Corruption was being exposed, criminals were being investigated, and justice was being served. Tuesday brought a new development that caught me completely off guard. Rebecca Walsh called Jim Morrison with a settlement offer. They want to make this go away, Jim explained over the phone. Quiet divorce, no contested assets, no public statements from either side. What's the catch? You have to retract your festival statements and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Essentially, you'd be admitting you made everything up. Absolutely not. Colin, think about this carefully. Fighting this could cost you everything. Legal fees, time, stress. This offer gives you a clean break and lets you move on with your life. It also lets them get away with everything they've done. No deal. They're scared, which means they know you have them dead to rights. But scared people with money and lawyers can be dangerous. Let them be dangerous. I'm not backing down. Wednesday evening, I was at Murphy's bar, nursing a beer, and enjoying the feeling of being treated like a celebrity. People kept buying me drinks, shaking my hand, asking for details about Saturday night's revelations. Lydia was in her element, holding court behind the bar, and telling anyone who'd listened about her role in gathering intelligence on Derek Shaw. I knew that boy was trouble the first time he walked in here, she announced to a group of admirers. Too smooth, too slick. Men like that always have something to hide. Around 9 o'clock, the bar's atmosphere changed suddenly. Conversation stopped, heads turned toward the door, and I felt the kind of tension that meant trouble was walking in. It was Harper, Sienna's best friend and most loyal supporter. She looked like she'd been crying, her makeup smeared and her usually perfect hair disheveled. She walked straight to the bar, ignoring the hostile stares from other customers. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. We don't have anything to talk about, Harper. Yes, we do. About Sienna. About what you've done to her. The bar had gone completely quiet. Everyone was watching, waiting to see how this would play out. What I've done. I told the truth. If that hurt Sienna, maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to humiliate me in this same bar. She's lost everything. Her job, her reputation, her future. Derek won't even take her calls anymore. Sounds like Derek's smarter than I gave him credit for. Harper's face flushed with anger. You destroyed her life over a stupid comment she made when she was drunk. How is that fair? Fair? I stood up from my bar stool, feeling the old boxing instincts kick in. Was it fair when she spent months cheating on me? Was it fair when she used inside information to help Derek steal from this city? Was it fair when they planned to run away to California with stolen money? She loved him. Then she should have divorced me first. Instead, she chose to lie, cheat, and steal. Those were her choices, Harper. I just made sure everyone knew about them. Harper looked around the bar, seeing nothing but hostile faces. These were working people, honest people who had no sympathy for cheaters and thieves. This isn't over, she said, her voice breaking. Sienna won't let you get away with this. She already has gotten away with it. She's free to go anywhere she wants and be with anyone who will have her. She just can't do it in my house or with my money. Harper turned and walked out, leaving behind a bar full of people who were firmly on my side. The conversation gradually resumed, but the mood had changed. Everyone had been reminded that this wasn't just entertainment. Real lives were being destroyed, even if those lives belonged to people who'd brought the destruction on themselves. Thursday morning brought the news I'd been expecting. Derek Shaw had been arrested on federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The FBI had raided his offices and frozen his assets. His luxury loft was being searched by federal agents, and his Tesla had been impounded as evidence. Sienna hadn't been arrested, but she was named as a person of interest in the investigation. Her access to city planning documents was being reviewed by both federal and local authorities. I felt no joy at the news, just a grim satisfaction that justice was being served. Derek and Sienna had made their choices, and now they were facing the consequences. Friday evening, exactly 2 weeks after Sienna's original humiliation at Murphy's bar, I found myself back in the same spot, surrounded by the same people, but everything had changed. I was no longer the guy whose wife publicly embarrassed him. I was the guy who'd fought back and won. I was the guy who'd exposed corruption and stood up for his community. I was the guy who'd turned a public humiliation into a triumph. Mrs. Folsom appeared at my elbow, dressed in her Friday night best and carrying her usual whiskey neat. "How are you feeling, dear?" she asked. "Like myself again. Maybe for the first time in years." "Good. You've been through hell, but you came out stronger." "What about Sienna? Have you seen her? She came by the house yesterday looking for sympathy. I told her she'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it." "Where is she staying?" "With Harper, last I heard. But that won't last long. Harper's got her own reputation to think about." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Sienna and I had been married for 5 years. We'd shared dreams, plans, hopes for the future. But somewhere along the way, she decided I wasn't good enough for her anymore. She had chosen to humiliate me, betray me, and ultimately try to destroy me. The fact that her plan had backfired so spectacularly was justice, but it was also tragedy. Not for her. She'd earned everything that happened to her. But for the marriage we might have had, the life we might have built together, if she'd been capable of loyalty and honesty. "Any regrets?" Mrs. Folsom asked, reading my thoughts with the uncanny accuracy of elderly women everywhere. "About fighting back? Number about the marriage ending." "Yes, I wanted it to work." "Of course you did. You're a good man, Colin Barrett. She never deserved you." Saturday morning, I woke up in my own house, in my own bed, with no one to answer to but myself. The October sun was streaming through the windows, and I could hear the sound of neighbors starting their weekend routines. Lawnmowers, children playing, normal people living normal lives. I made coffee and sat on my front porch reading the newspaper and watching the world go by. The festival story had finally moved off the front page, replaced by other news, other dramas, other people's problems. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You won. Are you happy now?" It was from Sienna. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about how to respond. Finally, I typed back, "I'm free." "That's better than happy." No response. Around noon, Jim Morrison called with final news. "It's over," he said. "Rebecca Walsh withdrew all claims this morning. Sienna's signed papers agreeing to an uncontested divorce with no asset claims. She just wants out." What changed her mind? Reality. Derek Shaw is going to prison. Her career is finished, and she's got no money to fight a legal battle. She's cutting her losses. When will it be final? 60 days. But Colin, there's something else. The FBI wants to interview you about Derek's business practices. They think your evidence could be crucial to their case. I'll cooperate fully. I figured you would. Just remember, this is federal court now. Everything you say will be on the record. Good. I want it all on the record. That evening, I drove down to the waterfront where the festival had been held a week earlier. The vendor booths were gone. The stage was dismantled, and the park had returned to its normal, quiet state. But I could still feel the energy of that night, the moment when everything had changed. A week ago, I had stood on that stage and told the truth to hundreds of people. Tonight, Derek Shaw was in federal custody. Sienna was facing the ruins of her life, and I was free to build whatever future I wanted. The joke was over. The marriage was over. The old life was over. But Colin Barrett was just getting started. I walked back to my truck, started the engine, and drove home through streets that belonged to me again. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new possibilities. Tonight, though, I was content to sit on my porch with a bourbon and watch the stars come out over the harbor. I had fought the fight, won the war, and earned the right to enjoy the peace that followed. Mrs. Folsom's porch light was on, and I could see her silhouette in the window, probably watching me with the same intensity she'd brought to the entire drama. She'd been my ally, my witness, and, in her own way, my friend. "Thank you," I said quietly, raising my glass toward her house. The light flickered once, as if she'd heard me. I finished my bourbon, went inside, and locked the door behind me. My door, my house, my life. My life, my life, my life, my life, my life, my life, my life.